It's Horse Beef. What's going on, everybody? Today I want to give you guys my definitive pound-for-pound rankings, the top 15. Now, I looked at the pound-for-pound rankings a little bit recently. I'll put them up on the screen right now. These are the official rankings. I see some issues there, right? There are some names included on there that I think should not even be anywhere near the top 15 pound-for-pound. Because I believe it's kind of lost meaning a little bit, right? To even consider John Jones a top 3, even top 5, top 10, or even putting John Jones on the pound-for-pound list at all is insane, considering he's fought one time in the last few years. He came essentially out of retirement, because no one can convince me otherwise that John Jones didn't come out of retirement to fight Stipe as a layup and just having a good name on the resume. For me, that shit should not actually contribute to you being on the pound for pound list. You have to be at least a little bit active. You need to have some sort of recent good wins to keep you on the top 15 pound for pound. You should not just be included on the list because of what you've done 4, 5, 6, 7 years prior. It doesn't make any sense to me. So for me, this is a proper pound for pound list based on a variety of factors that I will explain as we go through it. I was torn today whether to drop this video or drop a prediction for Izzy's upcoming fight. Even though it's a fight night, I don't usually make videos on the fight nights, but this is a particularly good one, and it's an Izzy fight, for fuck's sake. And there's been a bit of an Izzy saga on this channel if you've been around since the inception, really, since the inception of Horse Beef MMA. There has been an ongoing theme of hating on Israel Adesanya. Has enough time passed to mend that? Potentially, but let's just see when I do post that video. It'll either be tomorrow or the day after, but let's get into the top 15 right now. And at number 15, we have to have Khamzat Chimaev. I'm sorry. I'm not even a fan of this guy. I've actually been one of his biggest detractors. I am one of the biggest proponents of calling this guy overrated. I actually think he's quite overrated. He's a one-trick pony. He has that one trick, but it works almost every single time, and he's shown that, right? And the sheer number of first-round finishes that he's picked up against some elite competitors. Just recently did it to Robert Whittaker, right? He would have been on a list like this about a year ago. I think when I did make my pound-for-pound list, he was on it. So technically, he's kind of replacing Robert Whittaker in that pound-for-pound ranking in a sense. Not with the win over him, but he also beat Kamaru Usman before that. It was a weird win, though. Arguably could have even been a draw if you give the first round a 10-8 to Chimaev. Usman could have been given the second and third rounds, but this isn't really about that. Did it to Kevin Holland as well, and then he went to war with Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns in and of itself is a great war. He's just not very active, and that is the only thing keeping him just on the cusp of even being included in my pound for pound top 15. But he is here nonetheless, and he's fighting for a title soon. I assume he'll fight the winner of Dricus versus Sean Strickland. That fight has to be next up. And personally, I think he would beat Strickland, but I believe that Dricus would beat him. That's my personal opinion. But I think as things stand right now, what Chimaev did to Robert Whittaker and Usman may be controversial, as I'm really not even a fan of Chimaev, like I said, but I have to be objective, right? In a video like this, I have to be objective, and I think he deserves it. I think he deserves to be top 15 pound for pound, just what he's done recently. So when it comes to a GOAT debate, right, recency bias, in my opinion, does kind of cloud the judgment a bit. But when it comes to the pound for pound top 15, there has to be some recency bias involved there. So Chimaev for me is number 15. And at number 14, we have my boy Peter Yan, and I had to include him on here. I think the two recent wins against Song Yadong and Davison Figueiredo, I know in the first round against Song Yadong, it looked like he was potentially washed, right? We were potentially witnessing a washed version of Peter Yan, picked it up in the second and third, and started piecing up Song Yadong. And then we saw an upgraded version against Davison Figueiredo, fully recovered from those injuries. I can only assume because he looked incredible. Honestly, it was the best version I had ever seen of him. It was at least the best version that we've seen of him since he styled on Corey Sandhagen for 5 rounds. Did the same thing to an elite flyweight, one of the best flyweights of all time, who's big for the division. So it's not like Peter Yan was oversized against him, but he did look pretty bigger than usual. So maybe Peter Yan's on a bit of that sauce, but man, he looks incredible. And I know he did have a 3 losing streak before those 2 wins, but just look at the nature of them. The Merab win, absolutely 100% is a fair loss. He got dominated in that fight. Then you got the Sterling one, which is dicey, although I wouldn't exactly say it was a robbery. It was razor thin. And then he gets that robbery loss against Sean O'Malley. So he should have won against Sean O'Malley, in my opinion. Should not have as many losses as he does have, but I think the 2 recent wins just come to remind everybody why Peter Yan is one of the best fighters in the world. I saw Lucas Tracy actually just the other day, I think it might have been yesterday, where he ranked the most skilled fighters in the UFC, and he said that Peter Yan might be the most skilled in the UFC. I've been saying that for so long now. So, maybe Lucas Tracy knows what he's talking about after all. The dude is elite, and now in the last couple of fights, we finally got to remind everybody why he's so elite. Ranking him in the top 15 may be a stretch, but he's fighting Merab for the title next, and it's all but confirmed, I believe. I think they're going up against each other in some like Russian equivalent of The Ultimate Fighter. I look forward to that very, very much. Cannot wait for that fight. And yeah, man, Peter Yan, number 14, I think it makes sense. And at number 13, we have Yuri Prochazka. There's never a mention of this man in the pound-for-pound rankings. I know he hasn't fought a whole lot in the UFC. The man has 7 fights, I believe, under his belt, right? But knocked out Volkanovski, knocked out Dominic Reyes, finished Glover Teixeira to win the belt, and then gets finished by Alex Pereira before finishing Alexander Rakic, finished again by Alex Pereira, and then finishes Jamal Hill. So he's almost like the light heavyweight Max Holloway in the sense that he's one of the best fighters in the world, but he just has that foil, right? And that foil is Alex Pereira. He just has his number, but he beats everybody else. I think he beats Ankalaev as well. And I do think that the catalog of knockouts that he's put up, he's been relatively active, especially in the last couple of years. He's been pretty active, I guess. But I think he deserves it, dude. I think he deserves it. He's a former champion somewhat recently. Just lost the belt in 2023, at the end of 2023, and since then has shown that he belongs at the very, very top. He just can't do it against Pereira. That's pretty much it. I think the recent performance against Jamal Hill just shows at the level that he's upgraded to. The head movement slipping off the center line. He looked like the best version of Yuri that we've seen yet, and I see him, just giving problems to every single fighter at 205. Maybe even does it against Alex Pereira if he gets another shot at him. Unfortunately, I think he might have to wait for Alex Pereira to retire to claim that 205 strap, but I think he gets it done against everybody. As I said, aside from Pereira, I can even see him going down to 185 because he doesn't look that big in there, and he barely even cuts that much weight to make 205. So I can see him going down and challenging DDP. That would be one of the craziest fights of all time, and I think he might even get it done against him. Dude, Yuri Prochazka, disrespected. He's constantly laughed at for his style, like hands down, just blocking shots with his face. But he always goes in there with a chip on his shoulder, something to prove. He wants to show mastery, as he says. And I think every loss is just a step closer towards that for him. And he just does show improvements, right? And every single time, he doesn't seem to lose his chin. He doesn't seem to lose his head either. He goes in there every single time rejuvenated, shows different layers to his skill set. For me, Yuri Prochazka, number 13. I was kind of flippy-floppy on whether to put Peter Yan behind him or ahead of him. I'm not too sure. But I think the 3-loss streak for Peter Yan definitely pushes him right behind Yuri Prochazka because Prochazka's done it against everybody who's not Alex Pereira. And as you will see, Alex Pereira is in the top 3 pound for pound for me as well. So 2 losses to a pound for pound number 2, number 3 guy is, it's not the worst way to lose at the end of the day. So for me, yeah, Prochazka, number 13 makes sense. You can argue with me in the comments though if you'd like to. And then we have Chaz do Bronx Oliveira, number 12. The champion has a name, and it's Charles Oliveira, baby. I'm not exactly part of the fan club necessarily, although I am a huge fan of Charles Oliveira. I think he's incredible. He's one of the most skilled fighters in the UFC. I think the longevity of his career, and even the recency, right? The recency bias and the longevity, I think they both come together and make the case that Charles Oliveira, despite losses to Arman Tsarukyan, a very tight loss, by the way. I think Arman rightfully won that fight, but it was a very tight one. And the finish loss against Islam Makhachev, I believe he finished him with an arm triangle. But in between those, right, you have the finish over Beneil Dariush, right, the KO. You have the amazing dominant performance over Michael Chandler just recently, although Michael Chandler did have that very dangerous 5th round, like dicey 5th round for Charles Oliveira. But then before the Islam, when you have the Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler, Tony Ferguson, Kevin Lee, right, say about that what you will, but it was at a pretty decent time to be beating Kevin Lee, although maybe it wasn't at the same time. I honestly forget the whole course of Kevin Lee's career. It's very cloudy to me. But I would say that despite the couple of losses against Arman and Islam Makhachev, I think the fact that he stayed in the mix, he's not been going on long losing streaks, he's picking up losses, or he's picking up wins in between those losses, shows that he's not washed. He's still there firmly in the title picture and should probably be fighting Islam Makhachev for the belt next, if not Ilia Topuria. So for me, man, Charles Oliveira, number 12, makes all the sense in the world. I'm sure there will be some fanboys that argue that he should be even higher than this, although I would disagree with you. But then again, like I said with Yuri, man, argue with me in the comments if you'd like to. Number 12 for Charles Oliveira, Dubranch. Number 11, I think we have a non-negotiable. I think Sean Strickland is one of those fighters, like one of the non-champions who's just pushing for one of those slots alongside the champions. I think the fact that he had such a close fight with Dricus du Plessis, that he arguably could have been awarded. I thought Dricus won the fight, but then again, I just watched it recently, and it's so close. It's such a close fight. It goes on to beat Paulo Costa. Split decision. Should not have been split decision. It was a shit fight. It was boring as fuck. And I hate Sean Strickland's style, in all honesty. So, like, stylistically, he's actually one of my least favorite fighters. I hate watching him. But I do like the guy. His style is just not for me. And like, just look at his losses, right? You have that split decision loss to Jared Cannonier that I did not agree with at all. Split decision loss to Dricus du Plessis, which I agree with, but then again, super close and impressive the fact that it was so close. He has that win over Israel Adesanya, which is an incredible win. I would say one of the greatest title wins of all time. Abu, right? The Imavov win, I think actually ages extremely well, considering Imavov is now fighting Izzy, and a win over Izzy presumably puts him in the title picture. The KO loss to Alex Pereira, but before then, like, split decision to Jack Hermanson. How is that a split decision? I don't get it, right? Uriah Hall, Jotko, Brendan Allen before then. I think this whole run that Strickland has been on at middleweight recently, he's only lost to the best of the best or been robbed, right? That's the way I see it, at least. Best of the best losses or robbed. Not washed by any means. I think if he goes out there and beats Dricus du Plessis, then he's firmly... I mean, he at least takes over Dricus du Plessis' spot in the pound-for-pound rankings, considering how similar their resumes are in a sense, if you really think about it that way. But yeah, Strickland for me just outside the top 10. He's pushing it. He's pushing the limits. You may not like his style. You may not like what he has to say, but you have to recognize just how well he's done in the UFC recently, especially like in these last few years. Sean Strickland has become a serious problem for 185ers, and I think he's a stylistic nightmare for literally everybody. I can't think of anyone aside from Chimaev who matches up well against Sean Strickland stylistically. So for me, number 11 for Sean Strickland. And at number 10, I put Volkanovski here, but listen, man, I love Volkanovski. I think he's one of the greatest fighters of all time. I think he's an all-time great, 100%. But the recent form, he's won a single fight in his last 4 fights. He's coming up on nearly 2 years. Like, he's a year and a half since his last win. I understand he's only lost to the best of the best, though, and I applied that logic to Yuri Prochazka, and I applied that logic to Sean Strickland, right? You lose only to the best, in my opinion, is permissible, and plus Volkanovski. I feel like he jumped into the Ilia Topuria fight too soon, although I think he would have been knocked out. I've spoken about this before. He would have lost to Ilia regardless. Ilia would have knocked him out with that shot. In my opinion, like, no matter what, it does not matter what version of Volkanovski, whether he was recovered from the head kick or not. No. That shot from Ilia was going to put him out. Islam knocks him out. Weird circumstances. He was tubby off the couch. It seemed like he looked like he was coming off the couch. Love handles and all that. Didn't look in fight shape. Still an impressive shot to land on Volkanovski, though. Like, Volk is an elite fighter, right? Doesn't matter if he comes off the couch. The instincts are there. He still set him up with that head kick. Yair Rodriguez's win was extremely impressive. Maybe it's not impressive because it's over Yair Rodriguez, but the fashion in which he did it, the whole finishing sequence, is one of the most beautiful I've ever seen. And the Islam Makhachev loss in February of 2013, extremely close. Arguably a robbery, but for me, not a robbery. I think people, were just more impressed with how well Volkanovski did against a much bigger man. And I think, yeah, that does come into play a little bit when you do see it as a robbery for Islam Makhachev, because Volk, I think, just did a lot better than expected. Kind of clouds the judgment a little bit. I think Islam deserved to get the decision, but it's just a bad look for Volkanovski to do so well on the ground against him, and then in the 5th round to have Islam in that much danger and that gassed. It was a bad look at the very, very least, and I think Volkanovski's stock only went up. He actually remained pound for pound number 1 after that loss, but the recent knockout losses bring him down, I would say, quite substantially. It's getting to the point that if he gets knocked out once again by Ilia Topuria, which I think is going to happen, like there's just an argument that you just completely wipe Volkanovski from the top 15 pound for pound just in general, right? You cannot have somebody in the top 15 who's been knocked out 3 times in a row. And I think that's going to happen. So this is really just a last-ditch effort to say, okay, Volkanovski, pound for pound. But if he goes out there and beats Ilia, imagine that he suddenly skyrockets into the top 5 again, right? Maybe even top 3, depending on who you ask. So it's a weird one. This is definitely a weird placement to really put my finger on. But I think he's still number 10. although he's done worse as far as recent form than a lot of the fighters underneath of him, but it is only to the best of the best. So yeah, you know what? I'm just going to leave it like that. Number 10 for Volkanovski. And at number 9, we have one that a lot of you may consider to be rich because we have Volkanovski, who beat him 3 times, one spot below him. But you need to factor in recency. Like I keep saying, dude, the last loss to Volkanovski was in July of 2022. Okay, that's nearly 3 years ago. Since then, Volkanovski has gone on a downward slide, while Max Holloway has been mostly positive, right? He had a 3-fight winning streak against Arnold Allen, KO's Chan Sung Jung. Yeah, weird fight there. He should have never been in there with Max Holloway to begin with, as if that was some kind of a retirement fight. Max Holloway was nowhere near that level that Chan Sung Jung was at as far as retirement goes. And then he goes on and, against the odds, really KOs Justin Gaethje, then goes on to get KO'd by Ilia Topuria. Max is only lost to the best in the world, truly only the best in the world. I don't think he's washed either. I think there's a good chance that he could go out there and this new version, this new muscle-bound, lightweight version of Max could go out there and beat Charles Oliveira, right? He could go out there and beat Dustin Poirier, maybe get that win back as well, whichever fight is next up for him. Don't think he's washed. I think he's one of the best in the world and one of the best of all time, man. Max Holloway has done nothing to lose his number 9 spot in the pound-for-pound rankings. I would actually be curious to go back and see where I ranked him originally when I made my 2024 pound-for-pound rankings video, but I would assume it's around the same, man, because Max Holloway, the longevity of this man needs to be studied. He may have lost his chin against Ilia Topuria, but in my opinion, he didn't. I think Max Holloway is going to come in and show a vintage Max Holloway. I don't think that one knockout is enough to crack that chin. I really don't think so. Max is here to stay. And number 9 on my pound-for-pound rankings, dude. Argue with me if you like. And then at number 8, we have Belal Muhammad. For me, he has to be the lowest ranked out of all the champions. He has not put up a single title defense yet, but I think his last 6 wins in particular have been very impressive, right? Damian Maia, I guess that was a good win. But in 2021, maybe it wasn't that impressive of a win, though. Stephen Thompson, stylistic, favorable matchup for Belal Muhammad, you would say. Vicente Luque dominated him, relatively easily, and it's an impressive win considering that Vicente Luque beat him by knockout previously. So it's a tough win to pick up for Belal Muhammad mentally, but he did it. TKO'd Sean Brady. That's crazy. I think that win ages pretty well. A weird win over Gilbert Burns because of the shoulder injury and all that. But, like I said with Umar, dude, an injury that takes place in the fight cannot be used as an excuse. He still did what he had to do. Although I would say considering the shoulder injury, a shoulder to me is just way different than a hand. A shoulder immobilizes your entire arm, while a hand you can still land with it. You can still do things with it, but when the shoulder's gone, the arm is completely finished. So I think he should have looked more impressive over Gilbert Burns. Maybe he should have even finished him, considering he was incapacitated on one side of his body. I don't know. I don't understand it. But the win against Leon Edwards to win the strap, hasn't fought since then. I thought he was going to be more active, like he said. But yeah, let's see how he does against Shavkat and all that. I don't know. To me, he's the least impressive of all the champions, but he's a champion nonetheless, has picked up a good resume, good names in his last few fights, so he has to be number 8. At the end of the day, he has to be. And then we have Tom Aspinall, technically not an actual champion, but somehow still holding on to the interim heavyweight strap. It doesn't make sense to me. He's been pretty active as well, especially for a heavyweight, man. He's just been knocking out everybody he's come up against just recently, right? The Volkov finish, I think, ages extremely well. Injured himself against Curtis Blades, but then, just recently goes on to knock out Topuria, knock out Pavlovich, knock out Curtis Blades. He is the undisputed champion, in my opinion. John Jones coming out of nowhere to beat a 42-year-old man who hadn't fought in 4 or 5 years. It's not impressive. It's not enough to say that he's the champion over Tom Aspinall. For me, Tom is the champion, and it's as simple as that. I consider him to be the champ. I know I said I would be objective, but am I going to have any arguments to say that Tom doesn't deserve to be considered champion over John Jones at this point? Get out of here if you don't think so. Although I could use maybe a similar argument to say that Tom Aspinall hasn't actually been that active. He hasn't been that active, but holding on to the interim strap while the undisputed champion of your division is just running around lollygagging, fighting 40-year-old men and essentially holding the division hostage. It's tough for someone like Aspinall to put up title defenses or even get a fight in general. He's in a weird position. I think it's thanks to John Jones. But yeah, I think whatever fight he's given, whatever fight he takes in 2025, he's going to finish it. And for me, number 7 on the list. Then we got Donkey Kong on ice skates, man. Dricus du Plessis. undeniable, right? At least, at the very, very least, number 6 on this list. I was actually surprised not to rank him in the top 5. But then I just realized how underrated some of the champions in the UFC actually are, namely Alexander Pantoja, which we'll get into pretty soon. But Dricus du Plessis, number 6, I think makes all the sense in the world. But I wouldn't argue with you if you wanted to rank him at number 5, 4, or even 3 at the end of the day. It really depends on how you weigh up his resume, his most recent wins against Darren Till, Derek Brunson. But I think it's the last 3, right? You have Robert Whittaker by finish, a really close fight with Sean Strickland, but still a great win because Sean Strickland's a tough nut to crack, right? Izzy couldn't do it. Dricus was able to do it. And then the submission finish over Israel Adesanya. It's an impressive run. It's a super impressive run. It's a Merab level string of 3 wins that he's put up recently, man, against champions, ex-champions. Super, super impressive for Dricus. The style in which he's doing it as well is hilarious. So he has the comedy aspect. He's goofy as shit. And I think he beats Chimaev. I think he beats Strickland again. I think he might finish Strickland this time, to be honest with you guys. Dricus is here to stay. And number 6 on the list is a given at the very, very least. And at number 5, we have Ilia Topuria. Now, same number of title defenses as Dricus du Plessis, but I just think the last 2 wins, right? You beat Max Holloway, Volkanovski, literally the 2 greatest fighters of all time in that weight class, knocked them both out, and cracked the uncrackable chin of Max Holloway. The resume is extremely top-heavy, but I just think the accolade of finishing the 2 greatest of your weight class in the 1 year is enough to move him to the top 5. At one point, I had him at number 4. I even had him at number 3 at one point, but I had to move him back because I have to be objective. 1 title defense and two extremely elite wins, right? It's not enough to move him anywhere above number 5 for me. Like I said, top-heavy resume. Before that, it was Bryce Mitchell, Josh Emmett. Impressive performances, right? Finished Bryce Mitchell and dominated Josh Emmett for 5 rounds completely without gassing somehow while piecing him up the way he did. I don't understand it, right? Like most fighters, I feel like would get tired or at least show some signs of fading, but Ilia is a different animal. I think he honestly is, and he's really the only fighter right now, aside from an Arman Sarukian, that I can see actually going and beating Islam Makhachev. I could see it. If this fight was made today, for me, it's a 50-50, and I would even lean towards picking Ilia in that one. I think he's that good. He's really that good. He's proven it with his last 2 wins, although, like I said, too top-heavy to rank him above number 5. Although, the same argument with Dricus, if you were to rank him number 4, number 3, number 2 even, I wouldn't argue with you because Ilia is that good. And at number 4, we have the most underappreciated champion in the UFC, maybe even in UFC history. You could probably argue that that's Demetrius Johnson at the end of the day, considering he got traded for fucking Ben Askren. Oh, God. I can't even wrap my head around that to this day. But Alexander Pantoja is a close second at the very least because flyweight champions are just so underappreciated. These small men are incredible fighters. They are incredible fighters. They're so well-rounded. They're supremely skilled. They're some of the best fighters in the fucking UFC. So the fact that Pantoja just marauds through them the way that he does is so impressive. Let's just take a look at this 7-fight winning streak that he's on right now. Manel Cap, right, ages beautifully. Brandon Royval, he finished him. Alex Perez finished him, okay, maybe not the greatest win in the world. Split decision win over Brandon Moreno to take the title. I think that Pantoja deserved to win that, and he worked so hard for this, so he deserved it. Brandon Royval beats him again. Yeah, he got pieced up in the 5th round, but for the most part, it was all Pantoja. Steve Erceg, Erceg got pushed to the title pretty fast, but he looked so good before then. You cannot deny about the fact that Steve Erceg looked great leading up to that fight and looked great in the fight and deserved to be in there with Pantoja. But Pantoja, I think, rightfully got the decision there. I don't think it was a robbery like some people do. Then you have Kai Asakura, right, rising champion, comes to the UFC, gets that title shot right off the bat. People are thinking he'll knock out Pantoja. Pantoja blitzes him, eats all of his shots, looks unfazed, and then chokes him out in the 2nd round. I think the title defenses, right, 3 title defenses right now is enough really to put him at number 4. I understand that the quality, right, Ilia Topuria being below him, some people might think it makes no sense because all he did was beat, because he went out and beat, like I said, the 2 greatest featherweights of all time by knockout. But I think the win streak, it's not a top-heavy resume. Pantoja has a very good resume, as opposed to someone like Ilia, where the resume is completely top-heavy, but top-heavy in the best way possible. While Alexander Pantoja has just beaten the best of the best right now at 125 and essentially cleaned the division out to the point where fucking Dana White's going to Japan, plucking out fighters from Ryzen and matching them up in hopes they can capture that Japanese market. Alexander Pantoja says no, because he worked too hard for this. Number 4 for me, Alexander Pantoja. Stop disrespecting the man. He's elite, one of the best grapplers in the UFC right now, and number 4 at the very least for this man. And at number 3, we have Poatan. It has to be Poatan for me. Like what he's done in the UFC since joining in 2021, man. How quick he's done this, right? Makhachev, sure. Bruno Silva, sure. Knocks out Sean Strickland. Extremely good win, especially in hindsight now. Like, right, with recency bias in mind, Sean Strickland is a win that ages extremely well because no one is able to crack it, right? No one since Pereira was able to crack that code in the way that Pereira was, like to just spark him in the first round like that. Every other fighter that's gone up against Sean Strickland has been given a damn hard time, right? You have the Izzy knockout, and then you have the Izzy knockout loss, goes up, beats Jan Blachowicz, wins the title off Yuri Prochazka, and then goes on to defend that title 3 fucking times in 2024 against Jamal Hill, Prochazka, once again, Khalil Roundtree. You might not agree that Khalil Roundtree is a good win, but I think how well Khalil Roundtree did on the night proved that he deserved to be in there 100%. Yeah, he exceeded expectations, and maybe that's why we think that now in hindsight. Because at the time we were thinking like, wait, didn't Khalil just pop for something and get suspended and then he gets a title shot right away? Yeah, it doesn't really make sense to me, but I think the activity of Pereira, yeah, the quality of wins may not be up there with Ilia Topuria, at least as far as those 2 wins for Ilia Topuria goes, but the sheer number, right? Strickland, Izzy, Prochazka twice, even Jamal Hill to an extent, right? Jan Blachowicz, you might not agree that he won the fight. I think he did win the fight. But those are all elite wins, and look at the amount of champions and former champions that he's put up on that record. Yeah, you might not think that 205 is the best division in the world, but at the end of the day, man, if he goes out there and he knocks out Ankalaev like he has done to pretty much all of his last opponents, you could even rank him at number 1, man, because I think that is the only thing keeping Pereira away from that number 1 spot is just that question mark of how he does against a Dagestani, I suppose, right? Because people just assume that Ankalaev is the best grappler at 205 because he's Dagestani, but he seems like more of a striker to me. I think Pereira knocks him out personally, but then again, dude, Alex Pereira, number 3. Some people might say I'm crazy for ranking him this low. I think most people would probably rank him at number 2, but I think what this man has done recently, and not even just recently, in the last few years, the run of wins that this number 2 has picked up is just undeniable, and let's get into that. Now, this should come as no surprise for me. I know he's only defended the title 1 time, but it just looks like, especially when you look at the last 6 wins, right, he is on a, quite frankly, GOAT run of wins right now. Marlon Moraes, who was dangerous at that time, right? That is a great win over Marlon Moraes. Marlon Moraes, former champion, right? Jose Aldo, another former champion, one of the greatest fighters of all time. The manner in which he did it may not have impressed you, but he still did it nonetheless. And then what he did to Peter Yan, right? It's still a nightmare. Still a fever dream, I think. It doesn't even seem like it actually happened, right? Because it was so weird to see Peter Yan in that state. But he dominated Peter Yan in CGI fashion. Then he fucking does it again to Henry Cejudo, right? Loses the first round and then goes on to gas out Cejudo in the second round and ragdoll him and honestly put up a really fun performance. Then he goes and does the same thing again to Sean O'Malley. Oh my goodness, man. And of course people cry and say it was a robbery, but they're retarded. And then you have the Umar win, which is even more impressive than the O'Malley win, even though Umar didn't really put up a very good resume or even really deserve the title shot just based off of merit alone. Timing-wise, yes, he deserved the title shot the more I think about it, of course. But Merab went out there and he did essentially the same fucking thing to Umar. Umar on paper, right? A Nurmagomedov striking, he presumably has the advantage on the feet, which he did earlier on, and could match him in the grappling department. You would think that Umar is the perfect matchup to beat Merab. So is Peter Yan on paper, right? So is Cejudo on paper. Jose Aldo as well, one of the best sprawlers in UFC history. These guys are all supposed to beat Merab, and they can't do it, right? This is a run of 6 champs and former champs in a row. Merab Dvalishvili is one of the best fighters in the world. He's one of the best fighters of all time, and he's the bantamweight GOAT. And for me, number 2 pound for pound makes all the sense in the world. In my personal opinion, it makes all the sense in the world. And then at number 1, we have the obvious one in Islam Makhachev, right? I would be dishonest to be ranking him anywhere below number 1. I think he's still number 1 even without the Renato Moicano win. I don't think the Moicano win really does a whole lot for his legacy, although it does give him another title defense, right? And I think put him as the record holder for title defenses at lightweight, which is, it's just brilliant for him. And if he really does go up to 185, if he does that and he's successful against Dricus, then that would be one of the craziest things of all time. Like, have we ever seen a fighter go up 2 weight classes to fight for a second belt. I don't think we've ever seen that. So if he does that and is successful in that, he may even just be the GOAT, just based off that novelty alone. That would be ridiculous. But the wins he's picked up, right, the title defenses, the win streak that he's on, he's beaten some pretty elite competitors, right, Volkanovski twice, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje. Before that, you even have like the Dan Hooker win. Drew Dober, I guess, is somewhat impressive. Bobby Green. You know, like for Islam being pound for pound number one, it really is mostly just down to the title defenses. Yeah, like his resume is, you could argue, a little bit top heavy, but it isn't, man. He has those decent wins all the way up to the top, and even has like an old win against Arman Tsarukyan, which ages very well. So yeah, for me, like, there's not really a lot to say on it. Islam Makhachev is just obviously the number one pound for pound guy. I would be a contrarian to say that he isn't. And that's pretty much as simple as it is, man. Number one for Islam Makhachev, and I'm sure I'll get no arguments, but you guys do surprise me sometimes. But that does conclude my pound for pound rankings, top 15. I think it's fair enough, man. I think it's fair. Sure, my metrics for how I rank these guys individually may be different than your particular metrics, but I think it checks out. I think it makes all the sense in the world to be ranking the fighters that I ranked in the top 15 in the top 15. I think we need to change the definition of what pound for pound actually fucking means, and factor in recency a lot more than we actually do, right? Because when it comes to the greatest of all time, right, that's a completely different conversation than pound for pound. There has to be a ton of recency involved in that, at least to an extent, right? Maybe a little balance between recency and all-time achievements and all that, as long as a fighter's active. And that's about it, right? So that does conclude my video. Just wanted a nice little lighthearted one for you guys after all the drama and shitting on the Dagestani fanboys. I wanted to like bring it back a little bit and just give you guys a standard video where we talk about MMA, proper chat about MMA. Anyway, guys, I do appreciate you watching, and I'll see you on the next one.